This film, together with the blue maintenance manual, will help you handle maintenance on the exhaust valve. All necessary instructions for exhaust valve overhaul are to be found in the maintenance manual, group 275, pages 1 to 4. All spare parts needed can be found in the code book, pages U275. The instructions given in the course of this film are in the maintenance manual. Please read them carefully. Use the tools recommended, especially when grinding the valve, seat and spindle. When assembling, make sure that everything is perfectly clean. Don't forget that the reliability and life expectancy of the exhaust valve is dependent on proper maintenance. Here you see the tools needed for a valve overhaul. They are standard tools supplied with the engine. It is advisable to have these spares ready before the overhaul. The parts marked yellow are to be made ready for every overhaul. The red ones are needed only if the valve seat has to be changed. At the beginning of the working sheets, there is always a list of tools with the corresponding code numbers. From these numbers you can find the appropriate tool at the end of the maintenance manual, group 940. The valve protection must always be used for storing and moving the exhaust valve. For engine types RTA 76 and RTA 84, an additional support will be used on the swivel device. This swivel device makes valve overhauls much easier. It too is a standard tool provided with the engine. The device should be placed so that as little vibration as possible is sustained, because the valve seat is ground on it. To ensure chatter-free grinding of the valve seat, the swivel device is equipped with vibration dampers. All parts of the exhaust valve are dismantled in the sequence described in the maintenance manual, group 275, page 2. The housing head is lifted off completely. The hydraulic piston is secured against falling out. spindle nut is tightened hydraulically. Pay attention to the maintenance manual on Group 940, page OD, operating instructions on the hydraulic pre-tensioning jacks. Don't forget that when slackening with the hydraulic jack, it must be turned back by half a turn. These high-pressure connections must be clean and undamaged. Keep the vent screw open until oil emerges without bubbles. Pressure is raised to 600 to 620 bar until the nut can be slackened easily. After lifting off the air cylinder housing, the swivel device is turned 90 degrees. To ensure that the valve stem passes the frame of the swivel device, it is advisable to lift the valve by means of two pieces of wood about 40 millimeters thick. In this position, locking ring and Belleville washer are disassembled. The spindle seal should be dismounted after the disassembly of the valve spindle. If the headroom is restricted, the valve spindle may be dismantled in this position too. The swivel device is turned 90 degrees so that the valve disc points up. In this position, the valve spindle can be disassembled easily. In this position, the guide bush can be easily freed from possible residues such as lacquer, enabling effortless fitting of the pilot. If possible, the use of abrasive means should be avoided. After rough cleaning, the valve parts can be inspected. As an aid in judging the valve condition, you will find two printed forms in Group 275, pages 3E and 3F. First, we examine the valve spindle. Here is the spindle identification, which must be entered in the record. Signs of wear, especially on the sealing surface, are to be recorded. For example, slight coloured deposits on the inside of the seating width. The clearance between gauge and sealing surface is equivalent to the valve wear and must not exceed 3 millimeters. If the sealing surface is damaged, or there is more than 3 millimeters wear, the valve spindle must be either ground or replaced. Please be informed that damaged or worn down sealing surfaces can be reconditioned. Such work on mnemonic valves may only be carried out by specialized valve repairers authorized by Sulzer. Now the valve seat is assessed. Any damage on the seating surface is recorded under Findings. The clearance between gauge and sealing surface is equivalent to the seat wear and must not exceed 3 mm. If the seating surface is damaged or reveals more than 3 mm wear, the valve seat must be ground or replaced as the case may be. We shall show you how the valve seat may be dismantled and replaced if necessary. You will find the description in the maintenance manual, Group 275, pages 3 and 3A. This jack too must be vented until oil emerges without bubbles. It should take relatively little pressure to lift off the seat. This ring does not have to be removed. It is used again as a fitting tool. The bore and valve seat contact surface must be cleaned thoroughly and no damage may be revealed. A clean anti-seize compound must be used as lubricant. Always use a new original O-ring, coating it with the same lubricant. When pressing in a new valve seat, make sure that the O-ring does not drop out of its groove. The seat must be pressed in by hand as far as possible. Make sure that the valve seat is pressed in parallel and evenly. When the seat makes contact, the screws are tightened uniformly. The contact is checked with a feeler gauge. The valve seat must touch without clearance. The pressing in device must not be removed. It is needed for the subsequent grinding operation in the tensioned state. The grinding pilot is centered on these two cones. Consequently, the ends of the valve guide bush must be clean and undamaged. This special tool will be provided with the engine. Look up the maintenance manual, Group 275, page 3B, figure C. Make sure that this nut is well tightened to ensure good centering. The spring-loaded bolts of this additional pilot support must be fixed carefully without applying any radial or tangential forces to ensure proper centering and stability. Valve seats may be ground only with a suitable machine like this Hunger type. A grinding machine of this kind is included in the standard tools supplied with the engine. Grinding in the valve seat and spindle together is absolutely forbidden. A valve seat must always be finish ground in the fitted state. The grinding operation is the same, whether a new seat or a used one is involved. Even when fitting a spare valve spindle together with a used seat, the seat should always be equalized. Turn the hand wheel clockwise for rough height adjustment as far as possible. assemble the parts of the grinding machine according to the maker's instructions. To ensure that the interchangeability of the valve spindle is retained, the valve seat grinding machine must not have any angle adjustment. The finish ground seat must have an angular accuracy of 30 degrees, 0 plus 2 minutes. Before grinding is commenced, the highest point must be found on the seating surface to be ground. This serves as a reference point for the infeed. A dial gauge may be used for this. First, the seat is rough ground. We have obtained good results with the hunger grinding machine shown here using the following adjustments. Rotation speed of grinder 7 to 9 RPM, feed 3.5 millimeters per minute, infeed 0.1 millimeters. Always grind in the same direction. We recommend grinding from the inside out. Grinding is continued until the stone produces uniform sparking over the entire circumference of the seat. If the grinding disc no longer grinds properly, it may be dressed for a next grinding sequence. Rough grinding is finished when the seat presents a uniform grinding pattern. Always dress the grinding disc anew prior to finish grinding. After dressing the grinding disc, the new reference height must be found as starting point for the finish grinding infeed. For fine grinding, finishing, we have obtained good results with the following adjustments on this hunger grinding machine. Rotation speed of grinder 3 to 5 RPM, feed 1 millimeter per minute, infeed 0.03 millimeters. The infeed must be at least 0.025 millimeters, otherwise chatter marks may appear. When the seat displays a uniformly fine and chatter-free grinding finish, the grinding operation is concluded. Make sure that no grindings or other residues are left in the valve cage. Special attention must be given to the valve spindle guide. According to the situation, a new, used or reconditioned valve spindle is fitted. A little bluing ink is applied to the spindle to check its contact. Owing to the risk of seizure, the spindle must only be lowered to the seat to obtain a bluing print. The correct angle difference between valve seat and valve disc is checked by the opening S. In your maintenance manual group 275, page 3D, you will find a table showing the appropriate S dimension for your engine type. The bluing check must show the valve making contact at its entire circumference, but only on the inside. After the wear of the valve seat has been measured with the gauge and been noted on the respective form, the exhaust valve is now reassembled in the reverse order. Only lubricating oil is used as lubricant. Here we are fitting a new rod joint ring. This is how the valve spindle is pushed into the stop. Take care that no wooden residues remain between valve and spindle seat. On the air cylinder housing, we are also fitting a new piston joint ring. If you cannot fit the seal ring because it is too hard, it may be softened in hot water, around 95 degrees centigrade, for about 20 minutes. Use only locking plates in perfect condition. O-rings should always be replaced. Make sure that the air cylinder is driven down evenly. Please follow the instructions for using hydraulic pre-tensioning devices in the maintenance manual, group 940, page OD. After venting the jack, the pressure can be raised to 600 bar and the nut tightened by means of a Tommy bar. Check with the feeler gauge that the nut is making proper contact before lowering the pressure. All tightening values are to be obtained from the maintenance manual, group 013, page 1 and 2. Inspect the small bores on the vent housing for possible erosion damage. If necessary, this housing may be turned 180 degrees. The last check determines the penetration depth of the valve damper. It must be performed with the valve closed. Ascertain that the piston makes contact here. The position of the hydraulic piston has been altered by grinding. Consequently, the new shimmering thickness must be determined. In the maintenance manual, group 275, page 2C, you will find the procedure to determine the shimmering thickness for your engine. The dimension H is determined with the depth gauge, then the shimmering thickness H is calculated. Make sure that the shimmerings are undamaged, since they provide upper sealing at the same time. The exhaust valve is now completely overhauled and ready for fitting. Don't forget to use a new soft iron seal when fitting the valve in the cylinder cover. We are dependent on your extensive feedback to enable us to survey the reliability and life expectancy of the exhaust valve. We ask you to kindly send a copy of the record sheets to the address shown here. If you have any questions about any aspect of this film, or indeed about anything to do with the operation and maintenance of Sulzer engines, please call your nearest Sulzer representative. Our worldwide network is for your convenience.